The Tau Empire is a rapidly expanding younger covenant of alien races found on the eastern fringes of the Milky Way galaxy that follow the philosophy of the greater good, or so they say. The Tau Empire features three major species: the blue-skinned, railgun-abusing, long-range Tau, that are just up-and-comers that have found out how to use railguns and mechs. There are some buggy boys that can see in ultraviolet and also supposedly the electromagnetic spectrum, and that fly at you called the Vespids. But I want to cover the race of ever-evolving bird people that have signed a contract to be a part of the armies of the Tau. The Kroot are a Xenos race of humanoid savage mercenaries that are exclusively part of the Tau. They're characterized as a figure that's tall with a bird-like beak and quills coming out of the back of their heads, with rough and leathery skin. Besides that, Kroot are fairly hard to identify, mainly because of all the crazy and wacky alterations that are done to their bodies through selective gene gathering. That can make it so if a Kroot finds a particularly desirable genetic trait, then they can absorb and eat a creature for it. Yeah, this is Warhammer 40k, by the way. They can't just be bird alien mercenaries. They also have to be bird alien mercenaries that will eat you, because your hair looked nice or you had more muscle than usual. But let's back it up and stop talking about the Kroot in such broad strokes. Let's talk about where they come from, their culture, and all that other good stuff. The Kroot originate from the planet Peck. There's little known about it, with there being only a few passages written about it and smaller flavor text for the Tau Empire. Peck is a planet covered in massive jungles and mountains, with violent storms covering most of the more inhabitable locations on the world. The Kroot and their subspecies have all but dominated the planet's surface, with the other species on the planet being used for farming, or as wild beasts in unexplored areas, mainly because of the rampant amount of Kroots eating them. The planet Peck is very important culturally for the Kroot, with Kroot not even being born on the planet taking the pilgrimage to it at some point in their lives. The planet itself has been through a fair share of alien invasions too, like an orc invasion that happened from a rock crashing into it. When the orcs were dealt with, the Kroot ate the orcs and rapidly became a spacefaring species, spreading out to other celestial bodies in their system. But like every time, the orcs came back after a few thousand years, started a war that engulfed the whole entire Kroot homeworld in warfare, which is when the Tau came in and liberated Peck, with the leader of the Kroot at that time going and abandoning most of their technology and returning back to a more tribalistic way, abandoning what they learned from the orcs, which is where we find them in modern-day 40k, with them living in homes that are made out of leather and wood on giant trees found on their planet's surface. But on other worlds they can be found living anywhere other bipedal species in the Tau can. And the Kroot aren't only their beaks, quills, and stature when it comes to their physiology. They have hollow bone structures and 4 digits on their hands and feet. Their skin ranges from browns to greens to oranges, or whatever skin they might be, because all of those fun genetic traits they're always eating up. They're adorned with tribal markings painted onto their skin and reach the age of maturity in 12 years. Their skin grows more leathery and they become more pitted in appearance as they reach the end of their lives. Kroot are about a meter taller than a normal human. Their appearance is very deceptive too, because the Kroot look spindly and weak. They are somewhat fragile, at least compared to a space marine. They have an incredibly dense muscle structure that allows them to move fast and strike rapidly. They often walk by bounding, but are also inclined to jump very far ranges. Kroot have been observed as having a brain with a frontal and rear hemisphere. The frontal hemisphere controls logic and reasoning, while the rear hemisphere is smaller that deals with imagination and creativity, making it so they're great. And they have great instincts, but they're not great at making technology. The Kroot's head quills are interesting too, because they are sensory apparatuses that are connected directly to their frontal lobes, which can obtain information about the surrounding environments. Kroot's eyes are pupilless and milky white, with them most likely seeing infrared, allowing them to sense body heat, making them excellent trackers and hunters. Their sweat is oily and heat resistant, making it so they are often hidden on the infrared spectrum, while also using their sweat to mark territory or provide pheromone trails to communicate through scent. Shrewd Shapers are the leaders of the Kroot that alter their own and their followers' DNA by absorbing traits from other creatures through consuming them, making it so 2 different groups led by 2 different Shapers could look entirely different from each other, because the Shaper could notice that certain traits are desirable for the planet this Kroot group might be on. Like, if the Kroot wanted more muscle mass, then the Shaper would go eat an orc, so they would grow larger and greener in size. If they wanted to fly, then they would eat a bunch of winged beasts and hope to get that exact trait, all because the Shaper said so, of course. Shapers are also the religious leaders of the group, with the main idea of their religion being that when a warrior of any species dies, their spirit should be kept instead of passing on, so they eat them to obtain their spirit. Their DNA extraction is by no means exact, though. For example, some Kroot subspecies exist that are used as war beasts because of the animals they have eaten, being a lot closer to beasts than most sentient beings. There are some unknown monstrosities that exist in the jungles of Peck, though, that were once Kroot that ate their own, that are labeled as cursed by the Shapers. We don't really know what they look like, but apparently they're real scary monstrosities. There are some main subspecies of the Kroot, though. We've already talked about the Shapers, which are the military and spiritual leaders of the Kroot. There are also normal Kroot that are labeled as carnivores and are the basic infantry of the Kroot. They just look like normal Kroots, if there ever is a normal Kroot. Kroot hounds are Kroot that have turned into, well, hounds that are quadrupedal and canine-like. The Krootoks are like gorilla, but Kroot. And the Great Narlock is a Kroot version of a T-Rex. And the little brothers are just the Narlocks, which are used as cavalry by the Kroot. Although the Kroot like gaining as many abilities as they possibly can, there are some tainted meats that they don't eat, though. Tyranids in general are mainly a no-go because they are somewhat heretical because of their use of ever-changing genetic makeup, and probably because it would make some nasty gene stealer cult-looking Kroots. Kroots are so good at finding out what is and what isn't a Tyranid that they can actually find out if something is from a gene stealer or not, even if they show no gene stealer traits. Anything touched or warped by the taint of chaos, especially humans who worship chaos, are also non-edible, because the Kroot have standards, and Kroot that eat chaos-tainted flesh are more likely to become chaos-tainted themselves. And the Tau are not to be eaten because the Kroot respect the wishes of the... If a Kroot does ever eat a Tau, they are immediately executed. Like, no trial. They just get rid of them. Oh yeah, they also don't really want to eat necrons because necrons are literal living metal, and they can't really do that. Usually leaves very disfigured Kroot behind. The Kroot were originally introduced to the Tau Empire by having the Tau Empire save their home planet from all those nasty orcs we talked about, with the Tau being impressed on how well the Kroot fought. It was a 10-year war, relatively short for 40k standards, where the greatest Kroot leader, Algor Proc, swore allegiance to the Tau Empire and the greater good. And humanity first made contact with the Kroot when the Imperial Guard were in transit to the front line of a battle with the Tau, where the Kroot ambushed them and a large group of guardsmen were destroyed in a single rapid ambush. Space Marines came in and cleared out some of those aliens before the Kroot decided to retreat and rethink their plans. The Kroot somewhat recently got a standalone army within the past year. Well, more of a list of new miniatures that reach to about 500 points in a box. Getting more miniatures than the entirety of the miniatures that the Leagues of Votann have. On tabletop, they play as stealthy board controllers that are made to complement the oppressive damage and range that the Tau models are known for, making the Kroot stealthy ambush attackers that use lots of board control while doing some scouting and infiltrating. So that's all the info I have for this quick explanation on the Xenos race of the Kroot, the alien race of gene-eating bird people that are heavily inspired by the Yautja. They even had Tyranids crash land on their planet once or twice if you want to know about some AVP action later on. I have a question for you though, dear viewer. If a Kroot was going to eat you for your most desirable genetic trait, what would it be? Make sure to tell me in the comments down below. Till next video, fellas!